a brief recap of the whole journey we've taken here. We tried to, as it were, retrace sort of the history of the accounts of human values given in the Western philosophical tradition. That account seemed to dead end with some rather ordinary philosophical problems. In other words, we found out that most of our accounts wouldn't work too well until we got to Hegel's account, which reminded us that human values and moral and ethical problems come up in historical circumstances, which then forced us to investigate society and history, which opened up immense topics that we've only been able to say suggestive things about. Those topics we've addressed through these second set of lectures today. We've tried to address a few of them. Topics relating to the economy, I tried to distill some of what I consider Marx, the important insights Marx has into the economy, and others. In terms of the state, I didn't assign any readings by Max Weber, but I did suggest you look at some Kafka on the state. And then I ended up with culture in the last lecture. And when I got around to culture today, you may have noticed that my remarks became less systematic. Now, I've got to explain why. And that's that a culture based on spectacle and images has a peculiar, non-systematic character. It's like the fall TV schedule. All you really know about it, right, is that it's going to appear on a kind of grid. But culture in general, we're not even sure about the grid, let alone, you know, which dumb new sitcom goes in it, but we're not sure about the grid. So when you discuss cultural phenomena today, you almost have to go phenomena by phenomena to see how they fit. But it becomes crucially important for the kind of account I've been trying to give, that if the project is what I said it was in the sets of lectures before, trying to create a human life that's free and so on, it becomes crucially important if the culture itself is beginning to, as it were, destroy, deconstruct, or disrupt the very conditions for being human at all. Because it becomes pointless to talk about free humans in the absence of humans. So the problem of freedom was bad enough, right? Everybody went, I don't think that can ever be done. But by who, now's the question, which is even worse. So that's been the trail that we've followed. Now, the reason that I'm mentioning Freud at all in these last lectures is to remind us and take us back for a moment to Kierkegaard and deepen that analysis, where I did mention despair and used a kind of existential motif to turn it into a social one. Despair not as sort of an existential thing like a Bergman movie, The Seventh Seal or something, but as a social malady that is not merely psychological. Many of you have had the experience, I'm sure, of going to a therapist and hearing him describe the problems you have with your husband and how you should adjust, and you go, geez, I don't think it's that. I think it's really the whole situation, you know, the fact that he has all the money and that my life is shit, and I think that's the problem. Oh, we'll cut that. Anyway, my life is a mess, and that's the problem. Well, those objective problems were what I was trying to show despair to be, and not ones that could be fixed, as it were, by simply, you know, having someone say, adjust. Well, this last part where I'm going to talk about Freud is similarly not therapeutic, because that's not the interesting part of Freud to me. The book I've suggested is Civilization and Its Discontents, which has nothing to do, doesn't discuss at all, Freud's Oedipal drama, so there'll be no talk of penis envy, which is, I mean, whatever Freud may have thought about that or why, I don't care. This has to do with the processes that are, as it were, to follow a parallel kind of argument with Marx's. Much of human civilization has been built by economic motivations of which people were culturally unaware. In other words, they've been motivated economically, but cultural meaning made them unaware of it. That's a simple way to put one of Marx's sort of skeptical arguments. A way to look at Nietzsche's arguments could be to frame them in terms of the state, if you want to talk about power. Been motivated by principles of power, but ones of which we're unaware, sort of where they're rooted. To move to Freud, we will talk again about how our lives are motivated in ways of which we may be unaware. And in Freud, of course, the great discovery is the discovery of the unconscious. In a way, Freud's work hinges on an insight that makes all of philosophy problematic. Freud was that thinker who reminded us that the conscious mind, which was the topic of philosophy, both in terms of cognitive things and values, is a very small part of our psychic life. Freud compares the conscious mind in the book I'm talking about now. He compares the conscious mind to a garrison, a captured tiny garrison in an immense city, the city of Rome, with all its layers of history, all its archaic barbarisms, all its hidden avenues covered over by civilization after civilization. And the conscious, that's our mind, that whole thing. But the conscious part of it is that one garrison that's clear, that sort of holds out in this captured city. A magnificent metaphor for all of the surrounding motives, motivations, motifs, desires that drive us, that are not philosophical, that cannot, even if we talk to our therapist a long time, all be brought up at once. Now, it is true that Freud's goal was that the unconscious, the id, translated by Americans as the id, in German, the it, kind of a more normal word. The id, was to become conscious. Ego, the English word again being less spectacular, I, the I. I don't know why translators do that. It's to make the person sound like they're a scientist. You know? Freud says id and I, and we go id and ego, and it's all of a sudden it sounds like science. It's not. It's just it's a myth, but a very interesting, fascinating one. So the goal of analytic treatment would be for those unreflected, massive areas, again, to go back to that metaphor of the city, to become part of the garrison as it spreads out, things that we're clear about. In other words, it's not a bad metaphor saying we shouldn't be clear about who we are and have an I or a self or a subject. Now, why am I bringing this up now? Well, to contrast it with my last remarks about culture, if the goal of psychoanalysis is that the unreflected parts of us become reflected, that the it become the I, then the goal of a mass simulational culture, and this is a remark that I'm using from the Frankfurt School, don't worry about it, the goal of a mass telecommunication culture is psychoanalysis in reverse. It's that the little last remaining parts of that garrison become unconscious. It's precisely to reverse that process of enlightenment. Mass culture is enlightenment in reverse gear. Precisely to wipe out that last little garrison of autonomy. It is a constant assault upon it. That was why, and the last time I was out here, I approached